The metal shrieked piercingly as the crowbar dug deep into the lock. Robert, I roared, putting all my weight into the lever. My hands were slick with sweat. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. The lock burst open with a violent crack, and the door swung inward. A pungent stench, sharp and thick, assaulted me. Instantly. Urine, mold, something worse, something human and rotting. I recoiled, my hand flying to my mouth, my eyes watered. I fumbled for the light switch, my fingers trembling so badly I nearly missed it. The basement light flickered on, dim and yellow, and I saw him. Robert, my Robert. He was huddled on a filthy mattress on the cold concrete floor, skeletal. His beard was matted, tangled with God knows what. His hair hung in greasy strings. He was trembling uncontrollably. His thin arms wrapped around his knees. He looked up at me. His eyes were vacant, terrified. He didn't recognize me. Beside him were a few empty water bottles, their caps scattered. A plastic bucket sat in the corner, overflowing. I felt my knees buckle. Robert, I whispered. My voice broke. But this devastating discovery, this nightmare I was standing in was the culmination of 14 days of vague anxiety. A journey that began with a humanitarian flight to Phoenix. 14 days ago, I left Cleveland for Phoenix, Arizona to care for my sister Janet, who had undergone emergency heart surgery. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to leave Robert. He had Parkinson's. The tremors in his hands had gotten worse. And the dementia, God, the dementia was stealing him piece by piece. Some days he called me by my mother's name. Other days he asked me when we were going to get married, as if we hadn't already been married for 43 years. But Janet needed me. She was alone. Her husband had died 2 years prior, and her children lived overseas. So I packed my bag, kissed Robert on the forehead, and told him I'd be back in 2 weeks. That's when Weston, my son, and his wife Caitlin volunteered. Mom, we'll stay with Dad, Weston said over the phone. His voice was warm, reassuring. You take care of Aunt Janet. We've got this. Caitlin got on the line. Her voice was honeyed, soft. Don't worry, Mom. We'll take good care of Dad. He'll be safe with us. I promise. I believed her. I hugged her before I left. She smelled like vanilla and lavender. She held me tightly and whispered, Go. We've got him. The first week in Phoenix was exhausting. Janet's recovery was slow. The hospital visits, the medications, the sleepless nights. I called home every evening. Weston answered most of the time. Dad's doing fine. Mom, he's been sleeping a lot. You know how he gets. I did know. Robert slept more and more these days. But something in Weston's voice felt off, tight-clipped. I pushed the feeling down. I was tired. I was paranoid. By the second week, the calls started going straight to voicemail. I left messages. Weston, honey, please, call me back. I just want to hear Dad's voice. Nothing. Then the text messages started coming from Caitlin. Short, curt, we're busy. Dad is fine. Don't worry. He's resting. Everything's under control. Stop calling so much. You're stressing us out. That last one made my stomach twist. I stared at my phone, reading it over and over, stressing them out. I was asking about my husband, my Robert. What was stressful about that? I called again. Voicemail again. Voicemail. I texted Caitlin. I need to talk to Robert. Please. No response. The unease grew. It crawled under my skin, settled in my chest like a stone. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Janet noticed. Gloria, you look terrible. What's wrong? I don't know. I admitted something doesn't feel right. That night I changed my flight. I was coming home 2 days early. I didn't tell Weston. I didn't tell Caitlin. I just booked the ticket and left. I arrived home at 9 o'clock. In the evening, the house was dark. Completely dark. No porch light.
No.
Living room lamp. No glow from the television. My heart started pounding. The moment I pulled into the driveway, I grabbed my suitcase from the trunk and walked to the front door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the lock. Weston, I called as I stepped inside. My voice echoed in the silence. Caitlin, Robert, nothing.
The
House was cold. The air felt stale.
wrong.
I flipped on the hallway light and dragged my suitcase into the living room. That's when I heard it. A scratching sound.
Faint. Desperate. Clink. Clack. Clink.
I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The sound was coming from the basement. I walked toward the basement door, my legs moving on their own. My heart was hammering so
hard I thought it might burst.
I reached the door and stopped. My hand hovered over the handle. There was a padlock, a heavy-duty padlock I had never seen before. What the hell? I whispered. Then I heard it. A weak moan from the other side of the door. Robert, adrenaline surged through me. I ran to the garage, my hands fumbling over tools, knocking over paint cans.
I
Grabbed the crowbar and sprinted back. I jammed it into the lock, my hands slipping, my muscles screaming. I pulled. I roared. The lock burst open. And now here I was standing at the top of the basement stairs, staring down at my husband, my Robert, locked in a basement like an animal. Starved. Broken, I screamed. I didn't even know I was screaming until my throat burned.
I
Ran down the steps, my legs nearly giving out beneath me. I grabbed the cleanest blanket I could find from the laundry pile and wrapped it around him. His body was so light. He weighed almost nothing. I cradled his head in my lap. His skin was cold. His lips were cracked and bleeding. Robert, I sobbed. Descend. Robert. I'm here.
I'm so sorry.
I'm here. He looked at me. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. He didn't know who I was. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. 911. What's your emergency? My voice broke. My husband. He's in my basement. I think. My son and his wife. They locked him in here. Please. Please hurry.
The
operator's voice was calm.
Steady, Mum.
Is he breathing? Is he conscious?
Yes.
Yes, he's breathing, but he's so weak. He's starving. Please send
someone.
Help is on the way. Ma'am, stay on the line with me. I held Robert.
I
rocked him gently, whispering over and over. I'm home, Robert. I'm so sorry. I'm here. I'm here. In the distance, I heard the sirens wail. The fluorescent lights in the Cleveland Clinic emergency room were too bright. They buzzed faintly. A low hum that made my head
ache.
I sat in a plastic chair in the hallway outside the ICU. My hands folded in my lap, still trembling. I could still smell the basement on my clothes. Urine, mold, sickness. I wanted to tear them off to burn them, but I couldn't move. I just sat there staring at the pale green wall in front of me, waiting. A doctor emerged from the ICU. He was young, maybe in his early 40s, with tired eyes and a clipboard tucked under his arm. He walked toward me slowly, and I knew, even before he said a word, that it was bad. Mrs. Clark, he said, softly. I stood. My legs felt like water. Yes, how is he? Is he going to be okay? The doctor gestured to the chairs, and we both sat down.
He took a
breath, choosing his words carefully. Mrs. Clark, your husband is in critical condition. He's suffering from severe dehydration, malnutrition, and acute muscle atrophy. His kidneys are showing signs of renal failure. Based on his ketone levels and the advanced state of muscle wasting, we estimate he's been severely starved and isolated for at least 10 days, possibly longer. 10 days, possibly longer.
The
entire duration of my trip, I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands gripped the armrests of the chair. They starved him, I whispered. My son and his wife, they starved him. The doctor's expression darkened. We've already notified Adult Protective Services and the Cleveland Police. This is a criminal matter. Mrs. Clark, they'll need to speak with you. I nodded numbly. I couldn't feel anything. Not anger, not grief, just a vast hollow emptiness. Within the hour, a detective arrived.
He
Introduced himself as Detective Davis, Elder Crimes Unit. He was in his mid-50s, with graying hair and kind eyes. He sat down beside me in the waiting room and
pulled out a small notepad.
Mrs. Clark, he said gently, I know this is incredibly difficult, but I need you to walk me through everything from the beginning. So I did. I told him about Janet's heart surgery, about Weston and Caitlin volunteering to stay with Robert, about the phone calls that went unanswered, the vague responses, the text messages about coming home early, and finding the padlock on the basement door. Davis listened without interrupting. When I finished, he closed his notepad and looked at me. Mrs. Clark, I'm going to secure your home as a crime scene. The basement especially. We'll need to collect evidence.
In the
meantime, I need you to stay here with your husband.
Can you do that?
I nodded. Yes, of course. But I couldn't stay. Not yet. I needed answers. I needed to know.
Why?
2 hours later, while Robert was being stabilized, I drove back to the
house.
The police had already arrived. Yellow tape stretched across the front porch. Officers moved in and out there. Radios crackling. I showed my ID to one of them, and he let me through. The house felt violated. Every room I walked into felt wrong, as if it no longer belonged
to me.
I walked into the kitchen, my heart pounding, and stopped.
On the
kitchen table, sitting open and unlocked, was Caitlin's laptop. She had left it behind in their haste. I sat down slowly, my hands hovering over the
keyboard.
I felt like I was opening Pandora's box, but I had to know.
I
clicked on the desktop. There, in the middle of the screen, was a folder labeled Future Plans. I opened it.
The first file was a scanned document, a
financial power of attorney. I stared at it, my breath catching in my throat.
It
gave Caitlin and Weston full control over Robert's assets. His signature was at the bottom, shaky and almost illegible, as if his hand had been trembling when he signed it. The notary date was stamped clearly at the top.
Day
1 of my trip. I opened the next file. Bank statements. Our joint retirement account, our savings account, withdrawals, hundreds of them, transfers, $50,000, $70,000, $30,000, all gone. $150,000, drained in a matter of days. I opened another file. A reverse mortgage. Application approved. $200,000 against our paid-off home. The home Robert and I had worked 40 years to own outright. I stared at the dates on the documents. All the applications had been submitted in the first week of my absence. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't opportunistic. This was pre-planned. Caitlin must have prepared all the paperwork before I even left. The final file was a wire transfer confirmation. $350,000 sent to an LLC called Apex Wellness.
Solution, Caitlin's Wellness Startup.
I felt sick. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely control the mouse, but I kept clicking. I opened the Messages app. It was synced to the
laptop.
The iMessage history between Weston and Caitlin. I scrolled to the beginning. Day 2 of my trip. Caitlin had written, I moved him to the basement. It's just easier to manage. He's too confused to know what's happening. I felt my stomach twist.
I
kept scrolling. Day 5. Weston's message said, he's crying for mom.
I
feel sick. Should I give him more food? Caitlin's reply came quickly.
No, stick to the plan.
Just enough to keep him alive. 1 to 2 slices of bread. Water. We need him weak if he dies. It's complications from Parkinson's, but it's...
And stood.
My legs buckled. I fell to my knees and vomited. Onto the kitchen floor. My stomach heaved again, and again until there was nothing left. This wasn't just theft. This wasn't just greed. This was a cold, calculated plan to kill my husband. I called Detective Davis from my kitchen
Floor.
My hands were still shaking, my voice barely above a whisper.
Detective, I found something.
You need to see this. He arrived within 20 minutes. I was still sitting on the floor when he walked in. Two uniformed officers behind him.
I pointed to the laptop on the table. It's all there, I said.
Everything, the money, the reverse mortgage, the text messages. Davis pulled on a pair of latex gloves and carefully lifted the laptop. He scrolled through the files, his jaw tightening with each click. When he reached the text messages, he stopped. He read them
twice.
Then he looked at me, his expression grim. Mrs. Clark, this changes everything. These text messages elevate this case from neglect to attempted murder. I nodded. I already knew. Within hours, the Cleveland police issued a BOLO, a be on the lookout for Weston and Caitlin. Their photos were sent to every law enforcement agency in Ohio and the surrounding states. Davis and his team immediately drove to Weston and Caitlin's apartment on the east side of the city. It was empty. The furniture was still there, but the closets were bare, no clothes, no suitcases, no personal belongings. Davis told me later that they searched the building's dumpster and found shredded documents, bank information for an offshore account in Belize, a non-extradition country,
and
metadata into the search history, into the timestamps of every document and every search query, and the evidence was damning. Caitlin's browser history showed that she had been researching POA fraud for dementia patients' survival time, without food, and best non-extradition countries for months before I even left for Phoenix. She had been planning this long before Weston ever agreed to help her. The district attorney rejected Caitlin's plea deal. They were both indicted on a raft of charges: kidnapping, forgery, grand larceny, financial exploitation of an elder, and attempted murder in the first
degree.
The trial began 6 months later. I sat in the front row every single day, my hands folded in my lap, my eyes fixed on the defense table where my son sat, beside the woman he had chosen over his own father. The prosecution called me
first.
I walked to the witness stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth, and I did. I told them about the phone calls, the text messages, the padlock on the basement door, the smell, the sight of Robert, skeletal and trembling on that filthy mattress. The courtroom was silent.
The doctor testified next.
He explained Robert's condition in clinical,
devastating detail.
Based on his ketone levels, renal failure, and the advanced state of muscle wasting, we estimate he was severely starved and isolated for at least 10 days, possibly longer. The banker testified about the fraudulent withdrawals in the reverse mortgage, explaining how the signatures had been rushed through without proper verification of Robert's cognitive capacity. And then the prosecution displayed the text messages on a large screen for the jury. Caitlin's words, just enough to keep him alive. 1, 2.
2 slices of bread.
Water.
We need him weak.
The jury gasped audibly. One woman in the back row covered her mouth. Another shook her head, tears in her
eyes.
The trial lasted 3 weeks. The defense tried to paint Weston as a weak,
manipulated son.
They tried to paint Caitlin as a desperate woman trapped in an abusive marriage, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was 2 weeks later.
I
sat in the same seat I had occupied throughout the trial, my hands folded, my face expressionless. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s with graying hair and sharp eyes, addressed Caitlin first. Ms. Clark, you are an individual of pure malice, hidden behind a mask of family. You preyed on a vulnerable elderly man, suffering from dementia and Parkinson's disease. You orchestrated a calculated plan to rob him, starve him, and leave him to die in a basement. You have shown
no remorse.
This court sentences you to 35 years in the Ohio State Penitentiary, Caitlin screamed. She hurled obscenities at the judge, at the prosecution, at me. The bailiffs grabbed her arms and dragged her out of the courtroom, her voice echoing down the hallway. The judge turned to Weston. Mr. Clark, you are not the architect of this plan, but you are an active co-conspirator. You were the one who locked the door. You were the one who withheld food from your own father. You stood by and watched him suffer. This court sentences you to 25 years in the Ohio State Penitentiary. Weston didn't scream. He didn't protest. He just slumped forward, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. The gavel fell. It was over. I stood slowly and walked out of the
courtroom.
People reached out to me offering condolences. Congratulations. But I couldn't hear them. I felt no victory, no sense of justice, only a vast, cold emptiness. My son was going to prison and my husband would never be
the same.
The call came while I was at the hospital, sitting by Robert's bedside, watching his chest rise and fall with the gentle hiss of the oxygen machine. The afternoon light slanted through the blinds, casting pale stripes across the sterile white sheets. It was my lawyer, her voice sharp and determined, cutting through the quiet hum of medical equipment. Gloria, I have news, she
said.
The savings account, the $150,000, it's gone. The money was transferred to
Vice.
There's no legal mechanism to recover it.
I'm so sorry.
I sat in silence, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to her explain the labyrinth of offshore banking laws and international jurisdictions, but I wasn't really listening. I was thinking about the years, the decades, the nights Robert came home exhausted from the factory, his hands rough and calloused, the summers the first spent teaching summer school so we could save a little extra. Every sacrifice, every choice we made poured into that account, and now it was gone, vanished with the push of a button. Gloria, are you still there? Yes, I said quietly. I'm here. Thank you for trying. I hung up and stared at Robert. He was asleep, his mouth slightly open, his breathing shallow. I reached over and took his hand. It was cold and thin, the veins standing out like blue rivers beneath translucent skin. But I was not finished fighting. I hired a new lawyer, a woman named Margaret Chen, who looked me in the eye during our first meeting and said, "We'll get justice." Gloria, I won't back down. We filed a civil suit against the notary public and the law firm that had signed off on the power of attorney. Margaret was relentless. Deposition after deposition, document after document. She built a case proving that neither party had bothered to verify Robert's cognitive competence that day. They had rushed the documents through. Another signature in a pile. Another task to cross off their list. A year passed in a blur of hearings. I lost sleep over court dates and spent afternoons combing through paperwork. Every letter and email a painful reminder of all we'd lost. But perseverance had its reward. On a cold Tuesday in February, the court declared the power of attorney fraudulent and
void.
Margaret called me, her voice trembling with triumph. The reverse. Mortgage is nullified. The bank must absorb the loss. You get to keep your home, Gloria. I should have felt relief. I should have felt victorious. But all I felt was hollow. The house was mine again. But what did that mean? The wall still held the memory of that basement door. The kitchen floor still bore the faint stain where I had vomited. After reading those text messages, keeping the house felt less like a victory and more like being handed back. A crime scene. Still, something from years ago came back to me, a fund. Small, but steady, set up with a modest inheritance from my parents when they passed away 15 years earlier.
I had
Never told Weston about it. In truth, I'd almost forgotten it myself. $80,000. Held quietly in a separate investment account at a different bank. It wasn't much, but it was enough to restart my life. My secret became my lifeline. A small piece of independence no one could
steal.
Through it all, Robert's decline was swift and merciless. The trauma of those 10 days, the isolation, the starvation, the terror had accelerated. What disease had already begun? His memory faded in pieces, names and faces, sliding away like pebbles dropped in a pond. The doctors told me that severe malnutrition in dementia patients could cause irreversible brain damage, and Robert's scans confirmed their worst fears. The hippocampus, already damaged by disease, had deteriorated further. He no longer remembered Weston. He no longer remembered Caitlin. He no longer remembered the basement. Some mornings, sitting by the window in his new room at the memory care facility, he caught my hand and asked, "Are you the nurse? You're so kind to me." I smiled through the ache in my chest and told him my
name,
squeezing his fingers, holding him to this world for another moment.
"I'm Gloria."
"I'm your wife." He nodded politely, as if meeting me for the first
time.
"That's a lovely name." Even as he forgot me, I would not forget him. The cost of care was steep, nearly $6,000 a month for the memory care facility.
But
with the secret fund and what little I had salvaged from the wreckage, I made it work. I sold the house, that mausoleum of ghostly memories and unspeakable pain. The realtor asked if I wanted to stage it to make it look inviting. I told her no, I just wanted
it gone.
A young couple bought it 3 weeks later. I never told them what had happened in the basement. With the proceeds, I bought a small, sunny condo, 10 minutes from Robert's facility. It had large windows that faced east, letting in the morning light. I filled it with music and plants and soft blankets. Our wedding photo sat on my dresser next to a faded note Robert had written on our 40th anniversary. "You always one afternoon, 6 months after sentencing, I drove to the state penitentiary. The sky was gray, clawed, with bare November branches. The landscape was flat and bleak, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. I told myself I would go only once, that I would look my son in the eyes and try to find some meaning in the rubble. The waiting room was sterile and smelled of
bleach.
Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Guards checked my ID with clinical indifference, their faces blank and unreadable.
He sat
on a hard plastic chair and waited. Other visitors sat around me, mothers, wives, children, all wearing the same expression of quiet grief. Weston came through the door, escorted by a guard. He was gaunt and exhausted, his orange jumpsuit hanging loosely on his frame. His hair was cut short, almost shaved. He looked older, smaller, no longer hidden behind Caitlin's shadow.
For a
moment, we just stared at each other across the scarred plastic table. I could not hold back the tears. They came, unbidden, hot and stinging. "Why, Weston? How could you? We gave you everything. Do
How
this to
could
your
you?
father?"
To
me. His voice shook, broken and ashamed.
"I'm sorry, Mom."
I was weak. I hated my
job.
I saw everyone else succeeding, buying houses, going on vacations, and Caitlin, she just kept saying, "We deserved more. That you and Dad owed us. That you were sitting on all this money while we struggled." He looked at the floor, tears falling onto the scratched plastic tabletop. "She made me believe you were done. That Dad was just a burden. That keeping him alive was selfish. It twisted everything."
I
agreed. "I didn't even think until I heard you breaking down the door. Until I saw your face. Mom, I know I'm a monster. I'm so sorry. Please, don't give up on me." I wiped my cheeks, but my tears only ran faster. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 100 times. Imagined all the things I would say.
But
now, sitting across from him, all I felt was exhaustion.
When I spoke again, my
voice was cold as steel. I will not forgive you ever. You helped kill your
father.
and you killed my son, the boy I raised, the boy I loved.
He's gone.
You stay here. You think about what you did for the rest of your life. Do not contact me again. I stood. Weston sobbed. Quietly, his shoulders shaking. But I didn't reach for him. I didn't comfort him. I walked to the metal door, knocked twice, and waited for the guard to let me out. I never looked back. I never visited him again. A new life began. Colder and smaller, but not altogether empty. I spent my days with Robert, reading to him, holding his hand, playing the music he once loved, even when he didn't remember the words or my face or his own. I gave him gentle days, sunlit afternoons, quiet nights. I bought flowers for his room and sat beside him until he slept. I talked to him about our life together, even though he couldn't remember any of it. I told him about our wedding day, about the house we bought, about the trips we
took.
I told him I loved him over and over until the words became a kind of
prayer.
I thought about forgiveness, but it never came. Some things break beyond mending, but I held on to dignity for myself, for Robert. I held on to the peace that no one, not even our own son, could ever again take from us.
And in
the quiet moments, when Robert squeezed my hand or smiled at me without knowing why, I found something fragile and precious. Not happiness, but a kind of grace. The grace of being present. The grace of choosing love, even in the ruins. In the end, I learned that love is not always gentle. Sometimes it is fierce. Sometimes it demands we hold on when everything inside us wants to let go. Robert no longer knew my name.
But I
knew his. I knew the man he had been, the life we had built, the promises we made when we were young and believed the world would be kind to us. And I chose to honor that even in the ruins. Forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves, they say. But some betrayals run too deep. Some wounds never close. And that is okay, because grace is not about forgiving the unforgivable. It is about choosing dignity when the world tries to take it from you. It is about sitting beside the person you love even when they have forgotten you and saying, I am still here. If you have someone you love, hold them close. Tell them what they mean to you before time steals the words. And if this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to remember their own strength. And don't forget to comment and subscribe.